Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. Welcome to Sketch and Brew, where we sip something caffeinated, sketch, and learn to become better artists together. I'm Tom. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to draw the front view of a woman's face. But before we start, let me show you the tools and materials we're going to need for this tutorial. I'm using this to lay down the underlying structure of the face. It produces light, precise lines that are easy to erase and adjust as needed. The thin lead in this mechanical pencil stays sharp without needing to be sharpened, making it great for fine details. This eraser is perfect for cleaning up the drawing without damaging the paper. The 4B lead is a soft, rich graphite, ideal for darkening line work and shading. Its softness also makes it easier to blend smoothly. I love using this paper because it enhances the look and feel of pencil work. Its smooth grain allows for seamless blending when shading, making it perfect for portrait drawing. Alright, so step 1 is to draw a circle. Like I said before, I'll be using the H pencil for this part to create the underlying structure of the drawing. I'm aiming for a large circle positioned in the upper half of my paper. This leaves plenty of space for sketching in the facial features. There's really no need for perfection at this stage, just use the natural curve of your wrist to sketch it out smoothly. You can refine the shape of the circle later with an eraser. A helpful trick is to rotate your paper to view the circle from different angles. This makes it easier to spot and correct any distortions in the shape. So now that I have my sphere looking pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and mark the center with a faint dot. I'm pretty much just eyeballing this, but for those who want more precision, you can always use a ruler to find the midpoint. Now I'll just take a quick measurement with my hand. I'm pretty happy with where I've marked the center. So the next step is to draw a straight line down the middle of the circle. Remember to sketch lightly because we'll be erasing these construction lines later on. As before, I'm not using any tools to keep my line straight. I'm just judging it with my eyes. This works best for me because it really makes me feel like I'm training my eyes and brain. But if you feel more comfortable using a ruler, that's totally cool. It's whatever works best for you. Now with my paper rotated, I'm going to draw another line down the middle. This step is optional. This line here simply marks the center of the forehead. I'm not actually using it to guide any features. I just like adding it as extra practice when laying out my construction lines. So with that said, feel free to skip it if you prefer. I know it looks like a pie chart right now, but I promise that by the end of this video, it'll look like a face. Just stick with me. Now let's mark the hairline. This is done by finding the midpoint of the upper line. Next, we mark the eye line by finding the midpoint of the lower line. And the final step of this section is to draw a straight line across the circle using the areas we've marked as starting points. After that, I'll just take a quick measurement with my hand, and I'm pretty happy with this layout so far. So, to quickly recap, this upper line here represents the character's hairline. The line underneath that one is the middle of the forehead. And finally, the last line down is the eye line. Next, we're going to draw the lower half of the face by determining where the chin should go. To do this, measure the distance from the eye line to the top of the circle, then transfer that same measurement downward. This gives us a point to mark the bottom of the chin. After double checking the distance, extend the center line downward to meet the chin mark. With the center line in place, now let's move on to the jaw. Symmetry can be tricky when drawing freehand, so I do my best to mirror the jawline from the opposite side. If you have a light table at home, you can flip your drawing and check for asymmetries using the light. If not, just hold the paper up to any light source. This reverse view makes it easier to spot uneven areas, but if I was you, I wouldn't stress too much about perfect symmetry. Real faces are rarely perfectly symmetrical. Now I'm going to sketch in the neck and lightly indicate the neck muscles. After a quick sip of tea, I'm ready to start laying out the eyes. Since I already have the center point marked, I just go ahead and place a dot on each side, keeping the distance equal to set up the space between the eyes. I use my pencil to measure that distance. Then repeat it on either side to determine the size of each eye. I imagine the area divided into 5 nearly equal sections or eye widths. The eyes sit in quadrants 2 and 4. This is also a good time to add a few additional construction lines that I forgot to draw earlier. First, mark a vertical division in the middle of quadrants 2 and 4. This will help you place the pupils later when we draw the eyes. Second, add a line lower down to represent the mouth line. I align this with the curve of the jaw. Since I'm not aiming for classical facial proportions with this character, feel free to place the mouth line where I did or adjust it slightly up or down. It's important to keep in mind that real faces vary a lot. There are general averages for where features typically fall, but things like the length of the nose or the space between the eyes can differ widely from person to person. So embracing those variations can actually make your characters feel more natural and more expressive. Alright, now that our construction lines are in place, it's finally time to start drawing the facial features beginning with the eyes. For this character, I want to give her eyes a soft almond-like shape with natural flowing curves. I start by sketching the upper eyelid, shaping it with a gentle arch that rises smoothly and tapers downward. Next, I draw the lower lid, slightly straighter than the upper one, but still curved enough to maintain that soft, organic look. I then connect the two at the inner corner to form a teardrop-shaped closure, where the lacrimal caruncle will sit. Now, jumping over to the second eye, I do my best to mirror the shape of the first. When drawing something flipped horizontally, like the opposite eye, it's important to focus on the subtle details, the angle of the upper lid, the height of the arch, and how the curves taper towards the corners. One helpful trick is to focus on the negative space, the shapes around and between the eyes, instead of just the lines themselves. This can make it easier to spot subtle differences. After cleaning up the lines with my kneaded eraser, I move on to drawing the edge of the lower eyelid, right where the lower lashes emerge. From there, I begin darkening and thickening the upper lids, subtly hinting at the eyelashes. Next, I add the folds above the upper eyelids to give the eyes more structure and depth. I'm feeling pretty satisfied with the overall shape, so now it's time to move on to the pupils and irises. I start by sketching the contour of the first iris, then placing the pupil inside. If you've drawn the vertical construction lines earlier, use those as a guide to help with placement. Some artists prefer to place the eyes directly on top of the eyeline, and I do that too sometimes. But for this character, I've drawn it so that only the pupils rest on the line. In this case, the eyeline acts as a horizontal axis running through the eyes. Once I'm happy with the placement, I switch to my mechanical pencil with a soft 4B lead to darken the line work, bringing more contrast and definition to the eyes. With everything nicely shaped and popping a bit more, now let's move on to the nose. For characters drawn with classical proportions, the base of the nose typically sits right at the bottom of the circle or just slightly below it. But for this character, I want to give her a more unique facial structure, so I place the base of the nose a little lower than usual. To draw the nose effectively, it helps to understand a bit about its underlying structure. To keep it simple, you can break the base of the nose, where the nostrils sit, into 3 circles, one larger central circle, flanked by 2 smaller ones on each side. Beneath that is the septum, which is often shaded by a cast shadow from the nose itself. From there, I move on to the eyebrows. I start at the inner brow, shaping them into soft arches with subtle broken up hairs, especially near the inner ends close to the nose bridge, to give a more natural and delicate appearance. After drawing a couple of lines angled inward to suggest the bridge of the nose, I start working on the lips. Since I didn't include the mouth guideline earlier, I've reintroduced it here to make this part easier to follow. I begin with the upper lip, aiming for a soft, natural M shape that sits just above the mouth line. To place the corners of the mouth accurately, I trace an imaginary line straight down from each pupil. For the mouth line, the opening between the lips, I'm aiming for a soft, shallow curve that gently dips in the center and lifts slightly at the corners. I want to make it subtle, not very exaggerated, to help create a calm and neutral expression. For the lower lip, I draw a soft curve that's fuller in the center and gradually tapers off towards the edges. I'm keeping the shape subtle and natural here, just enough to suggest a relaxed lower lip. Then, I lightly sketch in the connoisseur lines, or simply referred to as the mouth corner lines. They help the lips feel grounded in the face and suggest where the lips transition into the cheeks. To finish off, I lightly sketch the philtral columns. These are the subtle vertical ridges that run from the base of the nose down to the top of the upper lip. With that done, let's jump into drawing the ears. For placement, the tops of the ears should align roughly with the height of the eyebrows, while the bottoms typically line up with the base of the nose or dip just slightly below it. Keeping that in mind, I begin by sketching the overall shape of both ears. I'm going with a soft oval that tapers slightly at the top and bottom to keep that form looking natural. With the outer shape in place, I move on to the inner ear details. I start by sketching the tragus, the small flap closest to the face. From there, I flow the line into the outer rim of the ear. Next, I draw a soft Y-shaped curve, followed by a gentle curve at the bottom to indicate the earlobe. Finally, I add a bowl-like shape in the center to suggest the concha, the hollow area that leads into the ear canal. Once that's done, I repeat the same process on the other side, keeping things loose and aiming for a clean, balanced look. I'll be covering each facial feature, like the eyes, nose, lips, and ears, in more depth in future tutorials, so definitely stay tuned for those. Alright, now I'll clean up the guidelines we don't need anymore. And with that out of the way, let's start drawing the hair. I leave part of the hairline guide visible to help me figure out where to start. I plan to draw the front section of the hair first, right along the hairline, and then branch out from there. Since I want this character to have long, wavy hair, I use short, curved strokes to create that flowing texture. I'm imagining her hair tucked behind her ears, so I add a few strokes in that area to suggest it's been pushed back. Overall, I'm keeping things pretty loose, nothing too detailed yet. I'm using faint lines and just focusing on the overall shape and movement, trying to build up that natural wavy style. Once I'm happy with how it's coming together, it's finally time to grab my mechanical pencil with the 4B lead and start darkening the line work and adding a bit of light shading. First, I focus on enhancing the eyes by adding extra detail to the lashes, using small, slightly curved strokes and building them up gradually. For the pupils, I leave a small circular area white to represent an intense highlight. This always helps the eyes appear more alive. Since I imagine this character has light-colored eyes, I keep the shading on the iris fairly light, only darkening the upper portion to suggest the shadow cast by the upper lid. I also lightly darken the contours of the iris to help define its shape and add a bit more contrast, which makes the eyes stand out even with minimal shading. Next, I darken the lines along the upper bridge of the nose where it connects to the inner part of the eyebrows. To bring out the structure a bit more, I add extra pencil strokes along the mid-bridge. Then I move on to the eyebrows, darkening them and adding more defined hair texture. I imagine the lighting in this portrait coming from the front and slightly above the character. So with that in mind, I add shadows to the underside of the nose and the upper eyelid area, keeping the shading symmetrical. From there, I move on to the lips, starting by darkening the line where the upper and lower lips meet. This suggests the natural shadow in that crease and adds depth, giving the lips a more three-dimensional feel even with minimal shading. I then add a few subtle creases within the lips to introduce a bit of texture. Next, I shade lightly beneath the lower lip to ground it and begin building darker values into the upper lip. The shadow is most intense along the lip line and gradually fades as it moves outward, helping to create a soft, natural transition. For the lower lip, I keep the values slightly lighter and make sure to leave plenty of white space to suggest a strong highlight. This contrast helps the lower lip appear fuller and gives a more glossy look. After darkening the line work for the jawline and ears, I move on to the hair. I begin by reinforcing the lines I laid down earlier, then start adding shadows in key areas to give the hair a sense of flow and volume. To put it simply, the shadows fall where the waves dip or recede, while the raised areas that catch the light are left white. That contrast helps create the illusion of wavy dimensional hair without having to render every single strand, which is something that I've definitely been known to do in the past, and I still catch myself doing nowadays. I leave a streak of white at the top of the head, where the hair parts to indicate the visible skin underneath. Then, I add a soft shadow around that area to suggest that the hair is lifting and rising slightly away from the scalp. Lastly, I add a subtle shadow around the neck to suggest that the hair is falling behind her back. This helps anchor the figure and reinforce the lighting direction. Before wrapping up, I also add some light shading to the sides of her face in a symmetrical fashion. This helps to softly define the planes of the face and gives it more structure without making it feel too heavy. I also add a cast shadow just below the chin to suggest the light source coming from above. This small touch helps ground the head and gives the portrait a greater sense of depth. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. As a brand new creator, it'll really help me out. In part 2 of this tutorial, I'll be diving deeper into shading the character's face with more detail, so definitely stay tuned. I'd love to have you back for the next one.